All right, everyone, please welcome on to the podcast for her first appearance, Kristy Hollingshead. She is the Associate Director of Data Science at Further and is going to be giving a talk at our upcoming December virtual summit on what's ahead in 2026 for data and analytics. Her session is going to be putting GenAI to work with business data, driving upside and managing risk. We're going to borrow a portion of that to discuss our topic today, mostly focused on RAG. So, our topic will be putting Gen AI to work using RAG, and I'm very excited to hear about all of this from you, Kristy. But before we jump into the questions, if you don't mind sharing a brief background about yourself to let the audience know you a little bit better, that would be great.
Absolutely. I'd love to. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you so much for having me. My origin story is a little bit of a creative one. I do like to share it. I come from a bookworm background. I was not necessarily a scientist, and I was not a computer science nerd growing up. My undergraduate degree is actually in creative writing. I was very determined to be an author. I still really love reading books. But while I was getting my undergraduate degree, my parents, who had paid for my college education, thank you very much, insisted that I take a computer science course. They said, "That's very adorable that you want to be, a core author, Kristy. But in the meantime, could you please just try this one course?" Both of them are nerds of their own kind. My mom's actually now a computer programmer, or was before she retired.
Amazing.
And worked in the space industry for forever. My dad was also in the space industry. So I took one class and absolutely fell in love with programming. I love it. It is solving a puzzle. I also really love solving puzzles. I do a lot of jigsaw puzzles on my own. And it's just so fun. I really loved it. After undergrad, I went to work as a tech writer for a little while, but really missed that programming aspect. Found a degree for speech to speech translation. And I was like, oh, language from the bookworm,
Right.
computer science programming from the programming puzzle. Perfect. This is ideal for me. I went to get my master's, got talked into the PhD. And in that course of time, I learned that I really prefer text processing over speech processing, which I'd originally started in. And that is what my ultimate degree is in natural language pipelines. And I like to say that I'm a hipster data scientist. I was doing it before it was cool. All of us in NLP like to say, like, we were working with language models before they were large. We've been doing this for decades, y'all. I'm glad that you have all realized what an awesome field this is, and what a cool tool that's now been enabled by a lot of deeper learning. But we were doing it decades ago,
Yeah, I
and
think
I still love it.
that's amazing, and I've heard so often on this podcast over the few years that we've done it that this is not really new stuff. It is just the spotlight is shown back on it. There is obviously a lot of advancements. I know we're going to get into some of what's current, at least in the space, and maybe a little bit more recent. And so, with that, I'd like to transition into my first question for you. And I know largely going to be discussing generative AI and RAG, but let me start with the Gen AI piece. Do you mind sharing what sort of generative AI applications you see your clients building and maybe ones that excite you the most?
Yeah, absolutely. We do see a lot of chatbots being built, which are fun and occasionally dangerous. You have to take into account a lot of guardrails that need to be put into place, and a lot of the risks that are there in terms of, especially in terms of reputation, but also remembering that people are very creative. They will 100% try to break any kind of system that's put in front of them. And so a too flexible chatbot will just rant on politics if you prompt it so, and don't have a guardrail in place for that. We've also seen a lot of sort of talk with your data agents. So that's learning to sort of querying your data on what your customers were doing, or uh, any other data that you might have stored in a database. And rather than learning the SQL to query it, or working with a data engineer to get at the information that you'd like, you can just say, hey, what was the most trending product last month? Uh, if you take that one step further, it gets a little bit more exciting, where you just ask, what are some insights from this data last month, or from this particular data set, or customers that are in this region, etc. And that always comes with a big grain of salt. Do check your sources, ensure that there's facts behind it. But it can lead to some sort of, some insight to say, oh, that's interesting that that trend is there. Does that mean what the LLM says? Maybe. That's up to you with your human brain to figure out whether that's really a reasonable and interesting insight. But it gets you started.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, we hear time and time again that chatbot seems to be the first thing that companies tackle, but there is a lot of pitfalls within that, as you rightly stated there. Well, so when a company is interested in getting started with Gen AI, whether that be a chatbot or some of those other tools that applications that companies are building, and they want to use their own data, what's the process for that? What does it take for them to, start using their own data to build these sorts of applications?
Yeah, the barrier to entry is actually really low now. There are a couple of methods where you can just securely upload your own data, whether that's maybe a Confluence page, or a document describing the sort of brand voice and brand uh, colors and limitations that are around it, up to a chatbot like a Notebook LM, or even OpenAI has a way to upload a couple of documents. I've heard it's limited to like 10. So there is a limitation, but you can absolutely get started if you have a subscription. You don't want to be uploading this data to just actual ChatGPT,
Right.
the free tier, because they will use that data for training. Like, they're constantly retraining these models and improving them. So be smart about it. But yeah, it doesn't take much to have an organization-wide login, so that your data is protected and you can still query it in these fun ways. A better way is to use an actual retrieval augmented generation RAG implementation, where you have your own database that an LLM can query. And there, your data is really protected. I like to say that RAG, if I can just go into RAG a little bit now,
Please.
RAG is creating a smaller, more focused world for the language model, for the large language model, where now any sort of language model that you might query has the internet at its disposal. If you upload a couple of documents, but additionally then has those documents. So think of the internet as the LLM's world. If you have RAG, then you're restricting the LLM to really querying from just that smaller set of data, which is your data. It is your business data, is very focused.
Mhm.
And so the LLM is restricted to only thinking about or considering retrieving data from that world that is your world.
No, that's great. And you teed me up perfectly for my next question. I was going to ask you to delve a little deeper into RAG. But maybe can you focus a little bit on why it's so important to just pull from that data when you're trying to build these applications, as opposed to, the rest of the internet that's out there? I mean, it might be obvious to some folks, but maybe not for everyone.
Yeah, well, I think that there are two sides to that coin. Uh, One side is the privacy of your data, and then another side is the accuracy of that data. So if I ask ChatGPT, what is my company's sick leave policy? I've done this because it's an example I like. It will fairly consistently return, I don't know, I don't have that information. But it could decide to go to my company's website look up that information if it has that information about me and try to return an answer. Or it might just hallucinate an answer, right? Say, your sick leave policy is just take off anytime you want. Wow, that could be, really incorrect. And so if I have a RAG implementation, then then I'm more guaranteed to have responses that are relevant and accurate for my business. Um, and I've seen a couple of implementations where you do need a really large database for that LLM to query because it's trying to find a varied set of information usually. And it will do best when it has sort of a lot of information to pull from. If you're only uploading like one document, then the benefit that you get is that the information is returned to you in sort of natural seeming language. But it's not necessarily something that you couldn't do just by hitting Control F on that same document. So you want there to be sort of a big pile of information that you're looking for, and then you want to be relevant to you so that when I say, what is my company's sick leave policy? It goes and finds the document that states the policy for my business. That's sort of a silly example, but I think you can sort of understand
Hmm.
and maybe sort of grow it from there.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I'm curious though, like how difficult is it to get set up with RAG for companies that may not, have a deep understanding or know where to get started with this? I'm
Yeah,
assuming you have to start with your own data, so maybe cleaning your data, but then, what would be the next step to get started with this retrieval
yeah,
augmented generation?
absolutely. Other than giving a pitch for a couple of our workshops on implementing RAG with your own business data, it's not too hard. You can set up a RAG database relatively easily. Imagine pulling in a ton of PDF documents, right? Or other formats, or Confluence, or pointing it at a bunch of internal web pages. So you can relatively easily set up that RAG database. It's not too hard. You have to make a lot of decisions when you're setting up that RAG database, which gets to be complex and can seem really overwhelming. But just to like give it a try, like just start, it's not too difficult. Just find a file and try it. There's some tools out there that will help, including various workshops that will walk you through the implementation. But if your data is you mentioned cleaning the data. You can try it with super unclean data. Just drop whatever you've got in there, but understand that garbage in, super shiny, fancy garbage out. LLMs will take the data that you're giving it and just return it in this really believable sounding language, which is part of what's dangerous about it. And so if you have old policy documents in there, that's not good. If you have documents that are difficult for the machine to read, some PDFs are actually just screenshots. And they're getting better at reading all sorts of information. If you upload a ton of sort of like spreadsheet information, really structured information, well, if it doesn't understand what the column titles mean, then some of the answers that come back can seem accurate. Well, I'm pointing at my data, it must be right. So there is, yes, a process of going back and cleaning and ensuring that what is being read is accurate and is being sort of represented well within that database.
Well, that's good to know. And it sounds like you can start on the smaller side. It doesn't need to be, your all of your company's data to get
Definitely.
started. Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
definitely. Just try it.
Totally.
I'm a huge proponent of like try it and see how it goes.
And you mentioned that RAG can help, prevent or reduce hallucinations. So I'm gonna ask you to dig a little deeper in there for me, maybe on the technical side, and ask,
That's
can you
fine.
can you explain like how RAG actually helps eliminate those types of hallucinations or at least lessen them?
Yeah, absolutely. It does reduce them. It does not eliminate them. for a couple of reasons. So again, to that small world analogy, where an LLM given access to the entire internet is just going to generate believable sounding language or sequences if it's returning an image or something. That's literally what they are trained to do. And the RAG implementation constrains that language. So the LLM is always taking whatever your query is, embedding it into a semantic space, and then going out to that RAG small world and finding information that it thinks is relevant. And that can sort of depending on the query, right? And depending on any guardrails that you might need to put in place. If I ask a RAG implementation about politics, it might not find relative information, but it still really wants to give me a response.
Mm.
So it might just hallucinate and generate completely reasonable sounding language back. If the data that it's accessing is structured in a strange way or broken up into pieces that are not necessarily semantically logical, insofar as an LLM has logic,
Mm.
then the responses that come back can be very reasonable sounding, but inaccurate um, or kind of wild, where it's just trying to get any kind of information it can. And if it's accessing data that is fragmented, or the sentences are not complete, or the data is too short, lots of reasons, then it could come back with information, and it's going to work very hard to generate, again, a response that seems reasonable. Always check your sources, even when using RAG,
Mm.
because that's what these systems are intended and trained to do, is to output something that is believable. So you have to check back into your sources. It can absolutely generate, oh, I found this document that's called this with 40 pages in it, and on page 37 it says this. Please go look
Right.
and just ensure it
Mhm.
before you really make big decisions based off of that data. It gives you a way to sort of get to the data faster, but always check on it. Your
Mm.
human brain does actually perform the logic and the necessary reasoning around. But that doesn't make sense as a sick leave policy. What happened?
No, and human in the loop is a phrase that's thrown around a lot, I think, and there's a lot of importance on it still, despite,
Absolutely.
all of these things that generative AI can help us with. Yeah, and it also sounds like prompt engineering, or at least becoming, a little bit more savvy with prompting these models, or whatever version of this application that you're working with, is quite important as well, I'm assuming,
Absolutely.
based on what you just
Absolutely.
mentioned.
Especially like different types of prompting. So you can have sort of the simpler like interactions like you might have with ChatGPT or Gemini. But there's also system prompting where you sort of inject you could think of it as at the beginning of your prompt, setting up the system to respond concisely and always cite its sources. And so there's a layer of this that when we use the open source apps like ChatGPT, like Gemini, like the AI overviews, there are system prompts behind there. And we just don't know them because that's proprietary. So that's how those systems are working. So when you're designing your own chatbot or interaction with your data, remember that that system prompt can be very important, and to remember to take that into account, experiment, track those experiments. So some system prompts will work well, some won't. You have to know that they're working well. The LLM evaluation is still a really challenging task, and we still tend to be sort of in the business of looks pretty good to me. Let's ship it. Red teaming is a thing that's become really interesting and very necessary. That's where you bring in outside users to sort of try very specifically to break the system.
Mm,
Anything that's exposed to an end user, whether that's an internal chatbot to talk with their data, or it's a chatbot for your customers, has got to be red teamed because people are creative
mhm,
and they will absolutely ask lots of random questions. And so this notion of red teaming has become really important and interesting,
mm,
and something that should be considered and included in any kinds of plans to release a production level chat.
mhm. Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense to me. I would imagine that many companies should be actively doing this this sort of practice. If not, they definitely should be. So let me ask you here as my final question. What do you see next beyond RAG? So if you don't mind maybe kind of taking a peek down the line for us, what do you think's coming down the pipe?
Absolutely. Well, I think that definitely agentic AI is the hot topic right now. It is definitely coming.
Hmm.
Agentic RAG might be really useful. I think overall, it's the notion of you want to be collaborating with your AI assistant. Don't put too much trust in them, but go back and forth a fair bit with them. Remember that you have the creativity, you are the director, you are the orchestrator, and I think that we're going to start orchestrating sort of a whole orchestra. It's
Mm,
conducting an entire orchestra of AI agents. And it's that collaboration that is returning a lot more business value that we've seen. The like sort of one shot and done, it's not that valuable, and it's not how people really use these systems. So
mm,
that notion of there's a collaboration there, and we all will benefit from adapting and adopting it. But it's AI as a tool. It's becoming sort of we're riding that hype cycle, right? We're on
mm,
a high agentic AI hype cycle, and we'll settle down. But I think that that notion of you're conducting a bunch of interns, they're AI interns, but they're still interns.
mm,
Like use them. They're great. Don't be scared of them. They're not going to take your job. I promise. Your human brain is creative in a way that the AI brain works is not.
mm.
So you're in charge. You're orchestrating. Got this. Use your tools. Use your interns to really get to that business value.
That's fantastic. And I agree. I feel like conducting is something that should be talked about more. I've heard orchestration, so it makes sense to take that next step. I like that. I think that's one I might steal from you moving forward.
Absolutely. I stole it from somebody else, so feel free.
Very good, very good. Okay, well, Kristy, I'm going to let you go at this point. But for folks' information here, if they listen to this and they're interested in following up and maybe asking a question, what's the best way for them to reach out for you?
You can find me on LinkedIn at Kristy Hollingshead. You can also email me at KristyHollingshead at gofurther.com.
Perfect. Kristy, thank you so much for your time today. It was an absolute pleasure talking with you. Have a good rest of
Absolutely.
your day.
Thank you so much for having me.
To subscribe to the Speaking of Data podcast or to learn more about TDWI's research and training on all things data management and analytics, visit tdwi.org or click the link in the description below. Thanks for tuning in.